All right, what's up, YouTube? We have a very special guest. For those who don't know, Repudilation is one of my all-time favorite brutal death metal bands of all time. I have a top four. So for those who don't know, my top four: Mortal Decay, Scatter Remnants, Internal Bleeding, and the Almighty Repudilation. How are you today, Brian?
Doing well. How are you, Jimmy?
I'm doing great. Very excited to do this. I got a lot to ask you, a lot of deep things. The Reputulation fans are going to be excited for this one. So, right off the bat, what does reputulation even mean?
Um, like I said, I'm an open book, so I'll tell you exactly how that name came about. So I was in high school. We were getting into my car. I think I had my license for like a week or so. We were piled in a car. It was me, Matt Ferrara, and Rich Turnbull, who was like the original vocalist. He didn't hang too long, but he recorded the vocals on that Purging demo. So he made his mark pretty well on that. Yeah, exactly. And we wanted the name to sound with a shun on it, but we didn't know exactly what we wanted to put before it. So we were kind of like putting these ideas together. And repudiate came up. We didn't even know what that meant. And we're in the car, and I think it was Rich that came out, and we had pretty much you know, the re and the pud in there, but he said shun, and then repudiation came out, and we were like, there it is. And within a week, Joe Riley, who was like not a great artist, but he, scribed up the actual logo, and then we were off to the races. So I did interview upon interview back in the 90s on that. Like, what's the name? And we always kept it like a close secret. Like, we know what it means. It had no real meaning to it. It just like,
That's why I was asking because I would always read the old interviews and it would be like, for those who know,
yeah.
if you
The
don't
three
know,
of
you're
us in
out
the
the loop.
back of my '79 Buick Regal, coming
But
up with it.
so before Reputulation, Mangled, that was your first band, Mangled?
Yeah, so well, it was the first like step Matt and I made into death metal. So like around that time, I want to say it was like 90, and the dates are blurry because when we were like actively playing as Mangled and like writing songs, if you want to call it writing at that time, we were like die-hard Internal Bleeding fans, and they took us kind of under their belt. We were local high school kids, and they were like our heroes. And there's a kind of an interesting story about how we got turned on to them because there was a local college station that was WBAU that like on Sunday night used to play like death metal. And we got turned on somehow to that station, and we got cool with the guy that was the host, Matt the Mortician. And he was playing the internal bleeding stuff. And back then it was all, we were writing letters to each other. We would promote, there would be like, send your inquiries to this address. So um, at that time we were like following internal bleeding, and then that was our like inspiration. Of course I was into like Cannibal Corpse and all like the bands at that time. I think the bleeding came out around that time. Pyrexia, Suffocation, those bands were still
Right,
pretty
the New
active.
York death metal
Yeah.
scene, what about like not just brutal death metal, like old school death metal, so like, Malevolent Creation,
Yeah, they were
Death, like
always,
the classics too.
well, Death for sure. And Death came across Matt. I'll never forget this because, and please reel me in if I get too far off base from your question, but Death, we saw Death on Beavis and Butthead, playing like the philosopher. Yeah. And like, of course, Beavis and Butthead like didn't even know how to process what they were seeing on there. We were like, this is pretty awesome.
Was it the Philosopher? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the tune. So,
Yeah.
and back in the day, there was like these CD, like you would join these CD clubs, and like if you paid like 30 cents or something like that, they would send you a bunch. And we remember we got what was it, individual thought patterns. We got it like free as part of that. So that turned us on to like death metal that we saw them on like Beavis and Butthead. So we formed Mangled. It was just me and Matt, and we recorded, this Mangle demo that people seem to want to hear. And I have been very open with this. I've had more labels from overseas write me and be like, whatever you want, we'll give you to put it out. And I'm like, oh God, come on, I was like 15 when we were writing that stuff. I mean, the lyrics are completely in the vein of Cannibal Corpse. And it was just me and Matt on a 6-track recorder that we knew somebody, we paid him a couple of bucks and he recorded the tracks for us. And that was like the first delve into kind of messing around with death metal and getting it played on that BAU show, which was hilarious. So like, of course, we were young. So we thought we were like, we're on to something here. Like
Right.
this could be our path to like getting exposure in this scene.
For those who have not heard the Mangled demo, it's on YouTube now, but it's very, very juvenile,
Oh
very
yeah.
like Leviticity, Waco Jesus, like just like juvenile, especially with the lyrics. The lyrics are very, very
Oh,
easy to understand and pronunciated. So it's just you listen to it, it's like, yeah, this hasn't aged well. I always say it's good
no.
when your first demo is always like your least best.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Yeah. Yeah.
you never want
We went somewhere. We
you
built
never
up. So
want
we
your
went.
first demo to be like your best thing.
Yeah, you're right.
You never want. So it's totally fine for it to be like, yeah, that first crappy demo.
Oh, but
Yeah,
like the
so
lyrics too, and like and just even in like the thank you of that thing, like I mean, we really were calling people out. Like we just did not realize like even 10 years after that, we'd have to kind of own some of the things we were writing in there. And it was just like, you know what? So like to do like a massive release again of that, if you know, you know. And I'll leave it at that. So
yeah. So Mangled is not Repudilation. A lot of people got that wrong where it's like they just changed the name. They did not change the name. It is a totally different
yeah,
band. But I always say Repudilation was like the first true like modern slam anything where it was like predecessor to Devourment. It was the next step up above like Afterbirth in like the true
yep.
slam sound. And the most notable thing is the like the frog croak vocals, almost like we mentioned Afterbirth, the Mortal Decay type of vocal. Where did that come from? Where was your first time hearing that vocal?
You just named it. So, all right. Who was the vocalist of Afterbirth? Matt something?
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah,
Rest in peace, Matt.
yeah. So we heard Matt do backup vocals on you're really gonna rack my brain here. We're talking Internal Bleeding's second demo in the
The perpetual
Perpetual Degradation.
that the last track, track number 4,
Yeah.
in Human Suffering.
Yes. So that tune, when we heard that, and you know, the funny thing is Rich Turnbull didn't really have a vocal style when we met him. He was a hardcore kid. And he was like an outlier too. Like we got him into the band, into Repudilation, and we were really on the fence about it because in New York, especially on Long Island, there was the hardcore scene and there was the death metal scene at that time, and there wasn't really too much crossing. Even though Internal Bleeding, I will give the credit to for bridging those gaps. And then they were pulling hardcore bands into the events that they were setting up. So, but when we heard that vocal, I remember turning to Rich and going like, "This is kind of what we want. Do your best right now to see if you can replicate that." And he did it, and we were like, "All right, go with that." And that's kind of where the whole style came from because he was just kind of emulating some little snippet of this guttural inhuman suffering thing. And you know, and it was funny because when we went into the studio to record Purging of Impurity, like he had the guttural thing down, but the rhythmic side of his vocal was he was having difficulty with. So that's when, and my kind of replicating that vocal style kind of came from me helping Rich develop his vocal style. And then when he was struggling in the studio with the rhythm side of things and like holding the growls as long as we wanted, that's when I just overdubbed a lot of it. So you're hearing like a bulk of Rich in that purging, but there's a lot of me in it. So when after like Rich left the band, we were like, after this, we're gonna re-record all the vocals again. It was more out of like, you're gone, we're gonna take this on without you. Um, then I started to do the majority of it in the studio, and then anything that we did after that, I did, you know, I did more of. So that's really where the style came from.
You're on Eternal Depredation doing the vocal where it's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
it gets a little bit more like reverby,
It
like
was, yeah, it
echoey,
was.
deeper kind of like.
higher pitched in the sense that it was more, I mean, more rhythmic. I guess being a drummer and all that stuff, I had like a rhythmic pattern in mind. And like I was able to, I mean, this is so funny because I'm a music teacher. So to talk about articulating the vocal in that style is hilarious to me now. But it's, yeah, you can hear the separation and differences in the vocals for sure. And,
Yeah.
I guess, but it was all the same kind of style, which is interesting because we got away from that style in the writing of the music for Encrypted, which is another point that we'll talk about
We'll
when.
talk about Encrypted. I kind
Yeah.
of want to go through like the history. Right now we're
Yeah.
still on Purging. We'll
Yep.
cover what was I gonna say about Purging? Now talking about rhythmatics, were you into like Dream Theater, Queensryche, Fate's Warning, sort of like the like genius metal, like mathematical? No.
No.
No,
No.
okay.
Then Matt and I, we we started playing with each other in like fifth grade, somewhere around there. So we went through middle school and we pretty much progressed. It was Metallica, Pantera. We heard Deicide. That's where the transition to death metal went.
Okay. Okay.
And then everything from that point of time went into like our influence was very much death metal driven. Everything from like 92 on was pyrexia, sermon of mockery, anything internal bleeding was doing, and
Right.
of course cannibal and all that stuff.
I
But
think
we were never
inside it
prog
says
guys.
Broken Hope, 6 Feet Under,
Yeah.
um, like Immolation, Candiria. That's like the only like oddball
Oh,
Candiria. But Candiria at the
can't
time was
forget
still like
Candiria.
death metal.
Well, Candiria was a massive influence on us because first off, they were a local Queens, Brooklyn band. So we were playing with them on these random shows. And I'll never forget Carly showing up to these gigs. Actually, Bill Tolley, who was like my drumming hero for the longest time,
Rest
still
in
is.
peace, rest in
Yeah,
peace.
yeah, definitely. I can't believe we're as far out, almost what, 9 years out from his passing. And yeah, I mean I mean that's another story in its own, and how that hit home and all that. But he turned me on. So I'm 15 years old. Internal Bleeding kind of took us under the wing, under their wing. We would go out to shows. I'd see Frank, Chris. They would always be there. Bill wasn't at the shows as much, but they invited us down to their rehearsal studio in like this real shady area in Westbury in Long Island. It's called Newcastle. And no, we didn't have driver's license. I had like one friend who ended up driving. So if we can get him to agree, he would come out with us and he'd drive us there. And that's when I met Bill officially in a rehearsal, and he was like, "You got to check out Candiria." And then we ended up, I don't know if we ended up seeing them first. We may have like just got their demo and ordered it, whatever it was. And I actually still have the cassette. It's what the hell was the name of that first cassette? Subliminal, I think it was. Um,
I'm not the biggest on that band to tell you the
yeah,
truth, so I wouldn't know.
it was death metal too. It was like,
Yeah, that's the one I know.
yeah,
And then it was like Surrealistic Madness was
yeah,
like
it
the
could have,
CD
yeah,
or
yeah. So that was
something.
the
That
next
was
one.
still
Yep,
kind of like death metal. The
yep,
song Temple of Sickness, that's like the one I
yes,
know. That's like the death
yep.
metal Candiria
Yeah,
song.
that was their whole thing, and they would throw these changes in there, and like these jazz changes that were great, and then like they'd come out of it again. But Carly on stage was like watching like freaking like Tupac. He had this like hip hop kind of thing going on there, and it was like the coolest combination. Plus the musicianship and Ken Shock, his whole approach to the drumming on there. So Candiria was a huge influence, and not to get into Encrypted yet, but you can hear that influence more in Encrypted on those 5 songs, and you can hear it in Purging because like the Purging stuff was already kind of being written when we were getting into it. But yeah, so I would say internal bleeding, pyrexia, candiria for sure. Those were like the real musical elements. We did go up through the prog stuff and I wouldn't say Dream Theater, but like definitely early Metallica, Pantera. We love that stuff. And Sepultura, another band that
Yeah,
we were
Sepultura.
huge into back in the day when Arise came out.
So you weren't like hardcore kids writing Purging.
No,
Like you didn't come from like the Biohazard or like
no, 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 not at
whatever,
all.
like Leeway, Marauder. Like you didn't. It was pure death metal.
It was death metal right into it. We
Okay.
jumped right in. Yeah. And
Okay.
it's funny because yeah, we were a cover band long before that. Like I said, Matt and I went through so many different phases of playing with each other, and we never played. We were like best friends, and we just evolved from my freaking garage to his garage to working at Taco Bell. Our first job at 16 was working at Taco Bell
Yeah.
drive-through. You want to talk about Beavis and Butthead? And we would work to pay for our rehearsal space and our insurance, for our car. And yeah, so it was that's it. We evolved together, and that's where we got into it. And he got more technical with his guitar playing. So unfortunately, he's not here to give you the backstory of that. But yeah, it's but the slam aspect, and I use that phrase crediting internal bleeding 100%. I can't believe that word is what it is now.
Yeah.
Because I remember that word being put out there legitimately like as just like a passing thing in the internal bleeding camp. That and the word stool. And if you ever talk to Frank Rini, and if he ever hears it, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Slam and stool, okay, were the two words that came out of that camp. Every other word for every conversation I had with them. And now slam is like a genre referral. So it's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Completely different than the dark, satanic New York death metal roots.
Yeah,
It's kind of Slam has kind of lost the death metal. It's kind of
yes.
like it's lost the death metal aspect. But so I want to go back to purging. Uh, the frog vocals, inhaled or exhaled?
Exhaled 100%, both
Exhaled
ways.
100%.
Yeah, Rich and me.
Okay.
Exhaled. Yep.
So just the
Yep.
do you get it from the throat?
Throat 100%. It's funny. I
No
started messing with
diaphragm,
it to a degree. Yeah, I
but
would say all throat,
mostly
all back here. Yep.
tongue placement on top of the like roof of the mouth,
100%. Yep. Yep.
just like that.
That was it.
That was
That's
it.
that's how I did it. That's how I'm 100% sure Rich did. Because
Yeah.
we would talk about it too when we were kind of like experimenting with that. Yeah, the first feeling of after you do it, you want to throw up because it's rattling your tonsils, and
Right. Right.
So all coming from there, but no inhaling.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
couldn't be articulate with any of the lyric, which is kind of funny because you can hear the lyric, but I couldn't be articulate at all, and I did not want to not sing a lyric. I felt like we worked on those as well.
Well, I want to get to that. So purging was very mathematical. I have the 7 inch Holy Grail split with this figure. This is the real deal.
You're the only one. I don't even have that one. I can't. I couldn't even. I can't get that if I wanted. I
Me
know.
and Frank Greeny are the only person I know who have this still.
I know one person that has two of them. Okay, and I can't get the second one from him.
I know someone in New York who's a huge collector. I would probably think of the same person.
It's funny.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
yeah, yeah, but he's a huge collector. The I want to talk about the very offbeat, very different than Purging, especially with the track intro. Intro is actually my favorite track. I just love the offbeat, just that slam section. I know it's based off of a rap song.
Yep.
I completely forget what it was. What was the rap song again? I completely forget it.
Now, this is me having a senior moment. So, I don't know if you're familiar with Fred
Figueroa,
Figueroa,
yeah, he's the
who did the
graphic artist.
he did the art for Purging. So,
Yes.
he and I have kept in touch over the years, and just recently we kind of it's so easy on social media. He'll reach out to me and this and that and that, and I ended up sending him a CD of a Corlock CD pretty recently, because he asked me if I had another one. I did, but so he wrote me, I want to say about 2 months ago, was like, can you tell me if this is the song? And I was like, I know it's a Black Sheep song.
Yeah, Black. I have it. I have.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
texted me. He was.
So, and then he went out and he actually figured it out. And I go, Fred, I knew the song. I mean, this is 30 years ago. But like, lost in translation over the years, but I knew it was a Black Sheep song. And Joe brought it to our attention because he was like, he kind of had his hands in a few things musically back in the day. And he's like, we should do, maybe something like this. So we took that idea and we kind of morphed it into our own. And the reason why we did it is we just needed more music.
Yeah, I just need the
And like,
lyrics.
yeah, we were going out and playing these festivals because locally, I don't know, like the scene here was good, but like it wasn't that great where you could go out and play in front of 150 people. But as soon as we got in a vehicle and got the hell out of state, The first gig we ever did out of state was in Illinois, I think Champaign, Illinois. I was like
Okay.
17 years old or something like that. I think I 17 or 18 or whatever it was. And yeah, you went from playing rooms where nobody gave a shit here to like people are actually waiting for you to show up. So we're like, we need more music, so let's keep this going. So that's how where we pulled MSO out of like the vault and kind of played with that a
Yeah.
little bit, and
It's
we
very
made it
like
more.
rappy. Like before Entorturement, they always very rappy. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
We had like this
100%.
shit.
And I was like,
Broke
oh,
up, didn't choke up. Saw my AK. It was broke
yeah,
up.
that's
It
it.
was like
That's
there.
it.
I could. That was just intro. The black
Yeah.
sheep. There you go. But yeah. So then after 7 inch and the re-recording of Purging, I have the 4 re-recorded Purging tracks on my YouTube for anyone that wants to check it out. It's quite different, very raw. The vocals are a lot more.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but Entorturement, how did that come about?
All right. So entorturement was an interesting thing for me personally because after Repudilation broke up legitimately in the studio, like we left the studio, things got so heated. We had one meeting after that studio session within that week, and playing music and just doing what I was doing at the time was not fun. It was stressful. It was all self-induced stress, by the way. I don't put that blame on anybody else. It was more me putting that. There was just a lot of pressure, and that came from the way we were promoting the Encrypted EP for as long as we were doing it. I mean, if we can get into that and that stress.
It
But
was
when
massive. I see all the newsletters and
it
Encrypted and
was
Blasphemy is coming, and you had shirts on the back of you and
we were
this
coming
demon
out
guy.
guns blazing. And like in my opinion, we were crossing lines because we were making no friends in the scene that we were relying on promoting that CD. I mean, I remember like None So Vile was like the big release around that time too. And I remember us like putting these ads out. And remember back in the day it was all mail. So
Yep.
like you would take chunk of these things, stick them into your mail, send it out all over the world. I mean, I was getting mail to my house. I mean, the tune of 10 to 15 letters a week, half of them from out of country. So you'd be promoting this thing, and we were putting some real bold statements. Like, heavier than this, more slam riffs than this. You think Kurtopsy's fast? Wait until you hear this. It's like, so when we went in that studio, it was just like, man, I think we kind of put ourselves in a corner where, at least the way I felt, it was like there was just a lot of pressure. So in Torturement, when Repudilation broke up, and I'm still bothered by the fact it did break up because we broke up and then we did a lot of the laundry in public in terms of like these fanzines and the interviews I was doing and what Matt was doing, and we were kind of burying ourselves where it was going to be hard to come back from. And what Entorturement was, it started out as a band that was not Entorturement. It was called Bearded Fetus, and these guys
Yeah,
had
like
like this
parody
almost
black metal people on it, and
goof death metal band. And like I was looking for a not well, prior to that, yes,
yeah,
exactly. I was looking for like a no pressure kind of thing just to kind of decompress. And Pete, the guitar player, who I ended up working with for a few years, even in other projects that were not metal or death metal, um, Pete was playing drums, so I could come in there and I knew I could bring something to it. So we did the whole Bearded Fetus thing. I did a couple of gigs on Long Island. We went out, we did a festival in Colorado. And then when we came back, I distinctly remember this conversation that we had because it was like a band meeting after a rehearsal. And I want to say this was after like maybe 6 months of doing it. I was like, this is kind of funny too. It's like, this is not serious. This is not focused. I go, we either need to get and do something that's more serious and focused, or I'm just not going to be able to hang with the Bearded Fetus thing. And
yeah.
I remember the conversation, and we were all cool and friendly. So it wasn't like this weird, tumultuous, like, yelling and screaming thing. And I remember having the Entorturement name in my head. And I was like, why don't we do this? We'll call it this. Who's on board? And they were like, giddy up, let's do it. It was just like the band overnight just went from Beard of Fetus to Entorturement, and it was on,
Okay.
and that's how it became.
I have one last thing to talk about Entorturement, and then I want to really talk about Encrypted.
Sure.
The logo. Have you seen bands ripping off your logo nowadays?
I yes, I have seen. I'm not going to name bands, but I have seen a very similar, um, like kind of design.
And
Um,
more so like a hardcore influenced brutal
yeah.
death metal act. How do you feel about them taking the logo?
So here's my philosophy now at 48 years old after 30 years. 30 years or 20 years ago, I would have been pissed and I've been waging war against them.
Okay.
That's the way it would have been back then. Now I'm like, well, then again, I mean, we stole from everybody. Okay, I mean, I got into dehumanized, and it's funny, I never admitted to it, but I was like this closet dehumanized guy because dehumanized to Repudilation was like our competition. And like when George and Matt started playing with each other after and started, I think it was 420, it was a hard pill for me to swallow at that time because I was like, they're the competition. But like I listened to some of the influences dehumanized in Entorturement, and I'm like, well, like I can let it bother me, but we were all kind of doing the same thing. And I said this to Chris Pravelis from IB. I was like, we were all trying to be IB, and we just all had these kind of spin-off styles. So we were all kind of robbing each other. When
Right.
it comes down to the art side of things and the actual printed Entorturement logo, yeah, I mean, that bothers me, but then again, look how many people ripped off Fred's design for Repudilation, that cover. So it's like, you can only do so much about it. If it's a blatant ripoff, like there was one band that wanted to use Entorturement in their demo title, and we actually said something about that. I'm like, I made up the word. Like you can't use that in the
That's not just like an English word in the dictionary. That's not
yeah.
like
And,
that's
and,
not
and
like
to
a
their
pronoun.
yeah, to their credit, they stood down and they got it.
Like that's
Um,
not a verb.
yeah, it's like that was I remember the moment that was made up. Like, hey, like what are we doing? So I appreciate the maybe the homage to it, but then again, I know we're not they're not crediting us for their influence. So I would like everybody to kind of stay in their lane, kind of come up with their own concept, even though we're all guilty of kind of using those influences, maybe abusing those influences a little bit in what we do. But then again, like influences are influences.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure Metallica's, ripped off a fair share of their riffs,
yeah,
and
jump in the
and
fire.
yeah,
I just my band Impure Conception just ripped off like 4 seconds of Repudilation. We have a part. It's like
and I am honored to hear that. You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah.
just like it's the fact that Repudilation is still a name that that's even in conversation, and it's something. It's something this many years have gone by, and I mean, when I left and we broke up. We never thought that 30 years would go by and this would still be a conversation being had, and people be reaching out to me to repress, and that's the one thing too is all the repressing that went on before 2010. Like I didn't have much control over that. Now I have a little bit more control over it. But who would have thought?
I want to talk about the repress. So, what is the deal with the original repress that Burning Dogma put out and the intro track? Like,
All
why
right,
was it so just like muffled and like bad quality?
I can tell you the one reason why that one. Now we're talking about the Burning Dogma one, right?
Burning Dogma and then
Because there
Quartz
was
Crystal didn't change it either.
yeah, there was a Frozen Dawn comp in there too, but we were like an active band when the Frozen Dawn thing came out. Exactly. The Burning Dogma. So that's after the band broke up. If I do remember correctly, like email correspondence wasn't even a thing then. So everything was done on the phone. I remember having a conversation about this and approving this release, but I never saw any proofs. I never saw like a final thing. I was contacted. I didn't even consult Matt about it. I just let it happen, which was probably at that point in time not the right thing to do because, he and I had the rights to the band. I mean, it
Hmm.
was our band. I mean, in terms of like, I don't want to use the word legally, but like all the copyrights, everything was him and I. And so I just kind of like said, all right, just do it, trusting that, that they were going to do it. And then what came out came out. And I know that Joe Riley did not approve and did not like the actual cover of that. Joe grew up and went to Catholic school and all that stuff, and he had like a problem with the concept.
Yeah, it's pretty sacrilegious.
Yeah, and I was like, at that point, like, there's nothing I could really do because it was already it was already pressed, And the funny thing is I don't remember making a dime off that. I don't remember ever receiving anything for it except for a couple of CDs. But you got to keep in mind, back then it was costing us so much money to press CDs. So just the concept of like somebody pressing a CD for me and saying like, "Here's some for you." Oh, I don't have to pay for it. It was like, "Oh, go ahead,"
Mhm.
And that was kind of the deal. I may be a little bit blurry about what the detail was. I don't remember making money, and trust me, I would have remembered because I needed money at that time. I was, 20 or something like that. I was like good and broke. But so when that came out, I didn't realize the kind of juice it was going to have. Because I really at that time didn't think very much about the catalog and the music. Like the band broke up right before the most anticipated recording. I didn't think anybody really wanted to hear any of that. And it was within like a few years of the band breaking up. I didn't think it was going to be anything that special. But like, look now, you have it. You're holding it.
Yeah.
I think I
Well,
I
most
have
people
one
aren't
too.
like me. I'm like a serious collector. You know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean?
would
Like,
I couldn't believe I can't believe 30 years later I'm seeing somebody besides myself with that CD.
I'm
It's
young.
like,
I'm
but
28. I'm young too. Like this was
yeah.
before me. I was still swimming in the sack in 98. I was born in 98,
Yeah, it's this was
so
all happening at that time, and just the way we communicated, and everything was pen and paper, and it was like I don't even know if I signed a contract. It may have just been a verbal agreement over the phone.
it's like a
So
handshake
I
deal.
I had no control really. From to the best of my knowledge, I had no control over it, and I don't want to say anything out of place because
Right.
I did go in to a contract with them for the vinyl. Was it Burning Dogma that I did the vinyl release going
I think it
back? I
was
don't
Burning
know.
Dogma and Corpse Gristle.
Yeah, it was Corp. Yeah, it was they came together, and I remember was it Ricky that reached out to me? Somebody reached out to me. It was just wanted to make sure I was cool working with the other pair. They combined on that deal, but with all these re-releases where I at least in the like within let's say 10 years ago, when it first started to happen, where I was making mistakes is I didn't really think there was going to be much of a buzz for anything about this. So when somebody reached out to me, it was like, oh, I'd be like, all right, well, I don't have the original art. If you can source that, whatever's online, take it, put it together, come up with something, let me see the final products. And for the most part, every deal that I did to try to get it out there, it went well. Where I started to see some of the inconsistencies and some problems is when I was licensing overseas, and
Yeah,
that's when I
Indonesia
realized,
release. I think the first re-release of Purging. Yeah.
yeah, I had. Then I realized, like, I did one license for a T-shirt design, and they sent me the design, and I was like, "What is this trash?" Like, I was just not happy about it. And I was like, okay, now I got to get a little bit more focused here about what is being put out there. And then the bootlegging and all that was another
Yeah.
thing. And that pisses me off. That really
Yeah.
does drive
That
me
that's yeah,
crazy.
that's a problem for every 90s brutal death metal band like Disfigured. I had an Indonesian person hit me up in like 2020. He was like, "Hey, can I get your scans for Disfigured paroxysm and I'll send you, like 3 shirts." I'm like, "No. I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, and I
I'm
appreciate
not
that.
doing that." But with the reissue on Iron Fortress, I'm good friends with
Yep.
Iron Fortress. He told me he was doing this because we're
Yep.
buddy buddies. I'm in his circle. I was like, you have to fix intro and you have to put on 97 decimation because there's like 4 reissues where it's just muffled or not there. I was like, we got to give the Repudilation fans like the ultimate Repudilation comp.
Now,
The
I'm
only thing
glad you
that's
did
missing
that.
is
Yeah.
just the four. But the two 7-inch songs are on there correctly because of me. I made sure. I was like, dude, you
I
gotta do
appreciate
it. Um, but the only thing that's not on here are the re-recorded tracks of Purging and then Encrypted. Um, Now here comes the fun part, Encrypted. All
All
right.
right.
So before we really dive into Encrypted and what happened there, I do want to talk about New York, sort of like the crossover between brutal death metal, New York death metal, and hardcore at the time, and like beatdown bands like Irate, Go to Mentees, Confusion, 1 Second Thought, Denied. Like,
Yep.
where did that all come from? Like, what was kind of like that?
So, I mean, are you saying like where that found its way into death metal, or at least what we were doing?
Yeah, like from New York, because then like internal bleeding kind of like went that irate route with like Driven to
Yes.
Conquer. Like, how did like all of that around the time? Because I think you're in like the liner notes for like one of them. Like, I think 1 Second Thought or Denied or
Really?
one of them
Oh,
for
very cool. Yeah.
Entorturement at least.
So, all I can say is this. There was a couple of clubs in Long Island that would host hardcore events that were like more clubs, not just like VFW holes that were, that would get blown out by 10 hardcore bands and never have hardcore there again. So because we were kind of like this one place was the Right Track in Freeport, and it was like weekly hardcore shows there. But because it was hard for death metal bands to actually get death metal shows, we would find ourselves just jumping on the old hardcore side of things.
Yeah. Okay.
And Internal Bleeding, and Chris Brevelis, I'm sure, has covered this in many of interview. Their slams were taking those beat down hardcore moments at these hardcore shows. That's when the pit would bust out, all the kids would be, dancing, throwing arms, legs, the whole nine. And, exactly, yeah. And from a death metal perspective, from what I was seeing at that time too, and like Chris and Frank predated me. They were in it maybe a handful of years before me. But like we were always looking for that crowd response, and you weren't getting that from like wall to wall blast beats, you know what I'm saying? And that kind of technical, punch in the face 100% of the time, which was happening more in the Midwest. Um, so Internal Bleeding will be the first group that like kind of really made it blatant. But you can hear it in like Suffocation. What is the first was it Effigy?
Effigy.
Yeah, there's a couple of like just kind of slams, but they're more the hardcore influence kind of deal. Even though they're more suffo in those recordings. Bill from Internal Bleeding was a huge hardcore guy, and Hatebreed was coming up at that time too, and doing really well. And we would be seeing those shows when they would come through, and we were like, well, we want that kind of crowd response. So really, that's kind of where it found itself. We would see like Sermon of Mockery, which I consider to be one of the greatest works of death metal ever. You
I agree.
kind of, yeah, it's up there.
Sermon of Mockery above Effigy, The Forgotten, any of Day of the Week for me.
I agree, 100%. And I love that stuff. And vocally too, even though it's not guttural like Repud guttural and Afterbirth, it was a major influence in how we approach things too. So these bands were doing it, and I think we were just jumping on, putting more of those things into our music, and then other death metal bands were doing it, and then we kind of stole collectively these hardcore parts. Internal Bleeding named them slams, and that's where this whole New York death metal style came from. And Dehumanize jumped on that as well. And you can really hear the Internal Bleeding influence in everybody's playing. And I do have to give complete credit and props to that band because they really, I mean, Chris really, he's a huge Sabbath guy. And he'll say, like, some of that came through, and I agree, you can hear it. But like they coined those slams, they took them in, they made death metal, even in their own style. And I really think we were all trying to be Internal Bleeding, because at that time, Internal Bleeding, there was a big club in Huntington called the Roxy, and I mean, I saw some incredible death metal shows there. Just good shows in general, but you would have them filling that room, and I would see just brutal pits, and you you look at the other bands like Pantera Far Beyond Driven too. If you think about that album, that came out around that time too, and that's like when Pantera kind of went into more of a like Phil Anselmo went into more of a less sung, more I don't want to use death metal kind of kind of
Yeah.
vocal, but anything to get the crowd moving, and you saw that evolution. And the one band that did it in the most unique way, I think, out of this Long Island music thing or death metal thing was Disfigured. We shared a rehearsal studio with Disfigured and Internal Bleeding. You want to talk about just the hijinks that went on there? I could go on and tell you stories all day about that. And then we would all go on the road together. And and Disfigured and Repudilation were like legit buddy bands for the longest time. So I thought they put the most unique spin on that because they just had different influence and they came from a different place. They were not death metal guys at all. They were
Okay.
like
So those
non-death
were the
metal guys.
hardcore kids making brutal death metal.
No, they weren't even hardcore kids.
Oh,
Like
really?
they were like cheap chick trick fans and like
Like Cheap
Ryan
Tricks,
Scamante was like,
Kiss.
I'm telling Kiss exactly. And they were like, we're gonna do death metal, but we're gonna do it our way. And that's what you got. And then they would throw in these little sneaky slams in there too. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I think that they were the least influenced by internal bleeding, even though they rehearsed 4 feet from them where they hung out.
That's like
Like it was,
Tom Araya and Slayer. He always talks about how he didn't even know what heavy metal was before he joined Slayer, and then Kerry King was like, "Listen to Judas Priest here, listen to Iron Maiden, listen to Merciful Fate." Like,
yep. And
you
then
know,
what came out, and it's Slayer. Like, come on. I mean, you can't
yeah,
argue that.
yeah, no, for sure. All right, now Encrypted in Blasphemy.
Yep.
I've heard all five. There's only five tracks done.
Yep.
From what
Well,
I've
five tracks
heard
that were
recorded.
let's say recorded.
I've heard the five tracks. Very technical, crazy, way different than Purging.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Are we ever going to see Encrypted hit the light of day to the public?
I'm going to choose my words very wisely with this, but I would be lying to you if I didn't say that over the last 3 months, I have been active trying to resurrect certain aspects of that. Um, Between you, me, and the YouTube world here, I did not listen to those 5 songs for about 25 years. And a friend of mine, that was like a friend of the band, and a friend of ours, but like, he would come out to the shows and he reached out to me. There's a very interesting story. I don't know if you want to consume the time. Maybe we'll come back to it. The purging reels got like sold or just like ended up on eBay by somebody that managed to get their hands on them. I actually got them back. I'm looking right at them right now. But there's a whole story. They ended up in Texas, and then somebody from Long Island who was a big Repud New York death metal fan, like just knew that he had. And Rocco, if you hear this, I appreciate it. He had to get them
It's
back.
Rocco.
It's
He
Rocco.
emails me. That's the guy.
Yeah. He goes,
That's
I
the
had to
guy
get it
I
back
was
to Long
talking
Island.
about.
Yeah, he
Rocco.
did. He did the complete ultimate solid thing. I still owe him. And he ended up buying them online, just to get them back to Long Island, and he had them. And then he reached out to me and he goes, "I have them. I just want to let you know they're not lost." And he ended up giving them to me. And he paid a lot of money too for them online, and I give him a lot of credit for giving them back to me. I did. I took him out to dinner. I tried to give him as much Repud swag as I could. He had a
Yeah,
lot of it, but
that's
he did a solid. So a similar guy, I don't want to drop his name, reached out to me, and he was like, "Listen, I got these. I got your encrypted on MP3. I guess Matt, before he died, gave him like a copy. Remember, we got remember, you don't have, we got it on cassette, leaving the studio as just a reference. It wasn't really mixed. Every track was
no, it's
slightly
very
different,
raw.
and there's like missing things there. There's like missing drum parts that were like never brought up in the mix, a bass drums that weren't evenly mixed because it was just like running it off the board. Here, there's your reference. Come back and finish your recording because it was getting ugly in the studio too. The guy that was by the way, where we recorded that was Purple Lake Studios, where Candiria did a lot of their recordings. We were inspired by Candiria to go to that studio. It was in Brooklyn. So, will you see it? Will it see the light of day? I'm gonna say this. All right. I have created a checkbox for myself here, multiple checks. There are a few things that have to happen in order for me to say, all right, this I will put out to the masses. First, I have to be able to preserve the guitar tracks. Chris Mabiuk and Matt have both passed away. That is the only recording of that session. Everything is mixed down to one track there with bass. That's what you've heard. So what I'm going to have to do, and I have been in the process of this, is try to extract things out of it. Technology has finally caught up, where we can do this stuff. 20 years ago, this wasn't even a thought. Even 15 years ago, it could have been done, but it wasn't really something that was cost effective to go do. So I got to be able to completely preserve those tracks. I have tried extracting drums, but then there becomes this question, like, you take a recording from 1998 and then we get me playing drums now on it. That's
The
not going to
technology
translate
is
well.
different. That
Yes,
was like
it's
all
going to,
analog, the old,
yep,
the way it was recorded. It's too modern sounding.
yes. So what I started to do is start to play around with the drums and extract sounds out of them and be able to kind of bring things out of that recording. Like, there's so much software out there where you can kind of remaster. So I've put a few sessions in, because fortunately I have friends now that like are really good with this stuff. And so the boxes that got to be checked. I got to be able to preserve the tracks. I have to be able to get everything to a point. So like, if you've heard it, the second tune, we we have these weird stops in the middle of the song, which were supposed to be overdubbed in. So we kind of didn't do anything with it. We just hit it, and we were going to get back to it. We
It's
never got
kind of
back
like
to it.
two songs in one.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It stops, and there's a
Yeah, it's
there's a
kind of
weird
like two
effect.
songs in one.
So I have to go in there and be able to complete what our vision was. And I did a lot of thinking about this, and I kind of remember what we were going for there. So once I can get the music down to a point where I'm like, okay, here it is. It's something. It's going to be raw. It's going to be in that purging rawness. Um, and that was my other thing. I did an interview about a year. I can't even remember who it was with, but it was all written out, and I'm sure it became something with the zine. And I never saw the final product. But um, I ended it by like, will it be accepted in 2026 if I, once again, extracted it and re-recorded it? I don't think it would. I think it would lose the essence and the soul of it. So people are like, oh, have somebody play the guitar for it. I'm like, first off, have you
Mm.
heard that stuff? Nobody's gonna be able to figure that shit out. It's all over the place. And one of the issues with the band at that time is like we had different visions. It's so ADHD, you
Yeah,
know?
that's why I love it.
Yeah, it's like to replicate it is just I don't it's just not going to happen. So once again, retaining the tracks, getting the music to a point where I'm like, okay, I can live and be cool with this, making sure I can enhance the drum track to fill out what's missing, and then becomes a vocal question.
Yeah, I was
And
going to ask you, one of my big interview questions is going to be what kind of vocals was even going to be on that? Was it going to be just the frogs like was it going to be like hardcore shouts at parts? Was it going to be like the normal like "Doosh," like death metal
yeah,
vocals? Like what in the world kind of like I played in my car a lot and I just kind of like sing over it. I'm just like baffled by what kind of direction like you
yeah.
had in mind for this stuff.
Well, I can tell you exactly what the direction was. So after Rich left the band, I use the word left. We kind of were like, we're done. It was like, and I hate to say it, it was because of a lot of just, he was into his own stuff and doing his own thing, and he wanted to be a hardcore kid, and that's great. Yeah, there was some other issues there too. I've spoken with him many a times. You know, one talk, it's funny. a few years ago, I'm sitting at the deli counter of Stop and Shop, and he's right next to me, and I go, "Would you believe that the two Repudilation guys are sitting online ordering bologna right now?" It's just like it's so freaking hilarious, how things changed. He still lives pretty locally and all. And every once in a while we'll bump into each other. We'll be on the road, and I'll see him in a car, and like he'll shoot me a hi, and so so nothing was ever on bad terms now or on bad terms now, but we didn't part in the best of ways. But then we got another vocalist in there that didn't work out. That was very short-lived. He did like a couple of gigs. So then Matt took on the guitar and vocal role, and then Joe took on the guitar and vocal role. And then vocally we changed a lot, and from the purging stuff, and it worked for the shows and all that stuff. But I always asked myself the question too, like, I think there was an expectation for Encrypted and Blasphemy in terms of a vocal style, and I think that expectation was going to be more towards a purging style. And how would that have been received? I'm not sure. That may have been a problem, in terms of the reception of that recording. So I have thought about this, and how would it work? The only way it would work is I'm not going to bring somebody else in to do it, because that wouldn't it would the authenticity of the recording would be compromised.
It would be
So
you.
I'd have to do it
Like
exactly,
you
and
wouldn't get me coming out because I
I,
already
I would
proved
get
I could do it. I
everybody.
already proved I could do it. I already sent my job application in this. I can
I
do the
would get
prog
everybody
vocals.
on earth to do it, but I'm like, how do I do this? So if I do the majority of the vocals, if not 100% of the vocals, I can then officially bring in some backup vocalists, and bring in some people that maybe have been influential in keeping this thing going. So I've thought, like, to keep the credibility, like, because I had the vocals, I did the majority vocals on Purging, and everything out. So it's like, all right, so I'm not like selling this out to be something that it's not, just to get the music out there. I really feel like I want to preserve the legacy of Matt and Chris's playing and writing. The three of us at that time were the sole writers. Joe, I think, not even I think, I know Joe left the band at a period of time there. That goes to show you like where the tensions were. And then Joe came back towards the studio time of it. So, you know, me doing vocals on it, then having some guest vocalists on it, make it kind of the unique situation where it's more of a celebration of something that never came out, but it's coming back out, kind of in the essence that it would have come out, how it would have come out, and then let it roll from there. And then it has to do with, okay, then who's going to release it? And I already had, I already kind of know what direction I'm going to go in with that, and because in this game of repudilation. I can't believe I'm saying this game of repudilation 30 years later. I really want to make sure I do have the control over how it's done, how it's put out. I hope a raw recording is well received. Like I said, I'm gonna do my
I
best
think
to enhance it.
so. I think so. It seems like we're kind of getting into that like raw 90s, like the 90s brutal death metal wave is here.
Yeah,
Like all the raw stuff, flesh grind, deaden,
yeah,
broken hope, that like raw sound is like making its waves,
yeah. It
Discord.
just, I just think what happens is, it's funny. I didn't start triggering drums until like the early 2000s, when everybody else was triggering. Um, and then like the triggering side, and I understand it because you need the clarity and all that, but the triggering side almost became like a stylistic sound that many people were using. So I do think, based off of like what I hear now and what I'm hearing from people, it's like it's kind of throwing back to the older sounding, maybe still triggered, but not like as sterilized, as sampled,
Right.
as some of the recordings are now, because once again, style, this sonic integrity of the music of the 90s had a thing to it. And
Yeah.
production was a big thing. Like, for us, we were very focused on the production of Encrypted, even though I don't think what our vision production wise is going to be represented on a re-release, because I don't know how I would do that.
I would just
um
keep it raw. I really
I
would. I
think
would
I'm
just
gonna,
keep
yeah,
it the raw because it's what it was. You know
yeah,
what I
I'm
mean? I would just keep it
enhance it
raw.
slightly and go from there. But yeah, it's going to be that raw thing. And Hey, like, when Voracious Contempt came out, like I remember that recording and hearing
That's
that.
raw. That
Really, right?
breeding the spawn, suffocation,
Yeah.
stillborn, malevolent creation, and harmony, corruption, napalm, death are like the most raw, muddiest like
And we
death
were all
metal
trying to
albums ever.
figure out,
Like,
yeah, we were all trying to figure out like how to get that heavy live sound. I'll never forget this. I'm a drummer, but BBEs, that was like the thing back in like 93. And nobody realized that they recorded like shit because everybody loved the way they sounded on stage. And then we all learned the hard way going into the studio that like BBEs were not the way we wanted to record our sound. But it was after the fact, it's like, so it's kind of funny, and that's guitar tone stuff and guitar, jargon. But and then the triggering thing happened, and then everybody had the same triggering sounds. We're all using the speed metal chat, triggering, patch, and every bass drum sound sounded the same. And I understand why on stage, we were doing that. I wasn't doing that. George from Demonize was one of the first drummers I know that was out there doing it because his feet were freaking lightning fast at that time and he wanted them hurt. I understood completely.
right. Now, so let's try to really get into like what was like the final nail in the coffin for Encrypted, where it was just like you guys want the slam, the other people want like the Slayer riffs and the crazy like parts of Repudilation. Like spoiler alert, you
Yeah.
just heard some sprinkles of it.
Yeah.
But like what was like the final like this is it?
So there is a little bit of a build up. So when we were a three piece, we the three of us, me, Matt, and Joe, really, I don't know, we congealed and gelled very well. We were going through the trenches. We were on the road. We were doing all this stuff, and there was a camaraderie between the three of us. So I'm not putting this when Chris came in the band on Chris. But what happened is when Chris came in, Chris was a great guitar player. And Matt and Chris would go spend like that three piece of writing music kind of stopped because Matt and Chris would be like doing guitar sessions, and that's where they were doing all the technical stuff and coming up a lot of stuff, and they were presenting that together to us in the rehearsals. And then like they got their own little vibe going. They would go get a little high, this and that, do their thing. And like Matt was my best friend. He was like my best bud. And then there was that divide in the band. So then musically we were changing, and I felt like it was becoming too guitar oriented. So did Joe. I'll never forget
Yeah.
Joe goes, "Why can't we try to like write a chorus or something like that?"
Yeah.
Um, because it was taking that voyage into a different realm, and maybe I should have been more accepting of that, because now I listen to it without the bullshit around it, like the ego and all that, and I'm like, I kind of see what we were going for because it was kind of unique,
It's
you know?
still unique after all. It's the first technical slam that's
Yeah,
not like something like technical death metal with slams where it's like defeated sanity or like necrophagist or anything like
yeah,
where it's like you hear technical death metal nowadays or like necrophagist like you think of like technical slam like this is like internal bleeding times like 10 with the ignorance of slam but with like that like just like atheist cynic
yeah.
death, like it's just, it's
It
just
was
so
different.
original and just so ADHD. Like there's like Slayer riffs in the first track. It's like
It took a lot of time away from it to listen back to it. And so, not to get too far ahead, so there was that weird tension going in. And then it wasn't like ugly going into the studio, but like I said, we were promoting this thing in such a way that there was so much pressure on me and us. And let's not forget how recording works when you're broke. Drummer goes in,
yeah,
he's got to get everything down in an hour or two. And as soon as every minute goes longer, now like this weird kind of like we can't afford this mentality comes in here because we weren't really backed by anybody. It was going to be released on two labels, but we weren't getting financial compensation for it up front. Um, so like I remember going in there, and you're nervous, you're trying to live up to this expectation. And I felt like I wasn't playing as well as I could have been. And it became like a snowball effect where like I felt like I wasn't really 100% being supported in the studio. And it got ugly in that sense where I wasn't happy, they weren't happy. And then we started to realize that like we're not going to be able to necessarily complete this in the 2 days we gave ourselves. That was it. 2 days. Um, plus I'm driving to Brooklyn and back, and then, so there was that factor too. So our commute each direction to get in there, we needed it done. So yeah, it got ugly and heated. And instead of coming out of the studio, and I look at this now at 48 years old, looking back, I've been saying, we got to decompress here for like a couple of weeks, and then let's revisit how we're going to go about this. We can try to maybe go out and play some gigs, come up with some money so we can go back in, maybe borrow a couple of bucks and pay it back, whatever it is. But let's get back in there. But the general vibe was this is not something that we can use. And where do you go when you're promoting? This is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then it
Yeah.
falls short. I think we were just like so done with each other that instead of stepping away, we realized that, you know what, this is going to end. Because now Matt and Chris want to do their thing. Joe and I had our ideas. Um, and it kind of imploded from the tension. And do I feel like I could have been smarter in the deal too? Maybe I could have been the one to suggest stepping away. No, I went in there like a hothead. I was completely defensive, and I wanted to throw down. I almost killed Chris. I remember like chasing Chris out of the studio, ready to try to kick his ass. It got to the point where like, how is this gonna get better?
Yeah.
And how we're gonna resolve this? I didn't think we could, and we needed a break. But at that point in our lives, we were doing these interviews with zines and all that stuff, and the mail kept on coming in.
Yeah.
And instead of being mature and saying, you know what, we're not going to discuss this in public. We're going to just kind of let this breathe. We're going to be hitting back or make up some sort of dopey PR excuse. Studio blew up in the midst of the recording. We got to go do it again. No, we decided to shit talk each other in fanzines
Yeah.
and in interviews, and I would be reading something that was said about me, and then Matt would be reading something, and it just kind of got foolish. And I'm the one that's here. I'll take a lot of the responsibility because those guys are, and I'm sure they would too. There is no question, and I said this the other day, that if Matt's if Matt didn't pass away as early as he did, and the circumstances around that, I really truly believe we would have come back together to try to make that happen. If not using the recording, because rumor, and I learned this pretty recently, that the actual I guess the ADATs or whatever we recorded on were actually taken from the studio. Like I think Matt had them, but the problem is when Matt passed away, everything vanished and ended up everywhere. So like some stuff was thrown away, some stuff was sold. The ADAT, not the ADAT, the 2-inch reel or 1-inch reel, I don't even know what it is, for purging ended up on the internet for sale. So I'm pretty sure. And then Mike Burrell, I think his name was, from Purple, he just passed away like 2 years ago. So that studio is no longer in existence. So I can't even go and get the encrypted stuff there. So I think we would have tried to do something with it, but not to drag this any further. Just I wouldn't say bad habits, egos, and an inability to communicate at that point of time was the reason why it fell apart. And I just think the immense amount of pressure we had to try to live up to something that, we I don't think we thought we could do it. At least I was questioning it. And Bill Tolley had a similar issue. We're going into the studio and like kind of wigging out during Voracious. And I remember hearing that story from Brian Hobby. Like Bill just got in there and he was just like the pressure. And then, got himself together. And I love Bill's playing on that
Hmm.
recording. It's great. But like, you go in there and you got this pressure because they had to live up to this follow-up of being signed to Pavement after Perpetual Degradation. And um I just think the way we handled it in the studio led to the, an outcome that should have never have happened. But it is what it is. It happened, and we all have regrets, and I have regrets for that. And especially now that Matt and Chris are not here, because I
Yeah.
ended up speaking to Chris. I didn't speak to Chris for years. Right after Matt passed away, I ended up talking to Chris. He called me, and I mean, it was like we never even missed a beat. It's funny, and
Yeah, it's nice when you can do that.
yeah, and then within a year, he was gone too. So it's like,
Yeah.
man, so it is what it is. So I look at it like if we couldn't rectify it back then. At least now I can do something to try to get it out there in the spirit of what it was, and at
Meant to
least
be, yeah.
have this one recording that there's like this weird kind of like mystical folklore.
What could have been?
Yeah.
What
So
what's what tracks were you proud of? Like what were the tracks that like you were like on board with from the
um
numbers?
the third and fourth track, because they're just numbered at this point in time. I actually have
Yeah.
song titles that
Yeah,
I
Fred
remember.
sent me the song titles. I'm not even gonna
Does he have
bother to
them?
look them up. Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to ask you for a favor because I can only remember a couple of them. If you can send me those song titles, that if Fred actually knows the song titles, that'd be
He had
incredible. I
them.
mean, he's got an incredible memory.
I'll pull them up as we're talking.
Yeah,
Um, so you like three and four? You didn't
yeah,
like
those are the
because I
best
like
ones.
one and two
I
and
like
three.
one too. I like one. Two is just weird to me. I have to finish it, and when I finish it,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll have a different
Let
approach.
me rephrase. I like the first like minute of song two, where it's like
Yeah,
that like rap section that dun 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 dun
yeah,
like that
it's
part.
it's it's got a theme
Spoilers,
to it.
spoilers. So track number one is Crucify the Demigod.
Okay,
Track number two is Subsist the Impotence.
interesting. Yeah,
Track number three is Deprivation through Sufferance.
wow.
Four is Enraged to Exterminate. And five is Encrypted and Blasphemy. Those were the working titles.
All
Right
right, so I remember.
right
Yeah,
from the source.
yeah, subsistent impotence. I remember that. I remember encrypted and blasphemy. Everything that you actually just said to me is coming back now. So that's kind of saves me a little bit of a headache because I mean, what was going to happen is I would have to write lyrics to. I'm gonna have to write lyrics to everything because they don't exist. But now, if I have the song titles, I can at least go in a direction with that.
The direction.
Uh,
What about those two tracks that are on the live recording on YouTube? It was like some live show. The
in
songs weren't
Illinois,
like
yeah.
officially. Were those supposed to be on Encrypted too?
So those were like very early versions of encrypted stuff.
Of the
So like
encrypted stuff.
when I go
Okay.
back and listen to that, by the way, the recording quality is so bad that it's hard to kind of make out stuff. And it's so funny when and by the way, that's Matt and Joe singing. So that's us as a three-piece up there. And that's the other interesting thing, and I think that's why there's like the confusion about Mangled and Repudilation. So like
Like all the members.
somebody, yeah,
Yeah.
there was a three-piece photo of what somebody took and they edited and they put Repudilation on top of it, but that was really Mangled with a bass player we had do one show with us. And that's all that was. But then that
Yeah.
became Repudilation. So then it became a four-piece Repudilation for Purging, and then we became a three-piece slightly after that. And then everybody thought that like that photo was Purge. So yeah. So that was them singing, and when I listened I actually have it on cassette, which is kind of funny. I didn't put it up in the internet. I don't know, somebody must have recorded it there. But and then sent it to me, 30 years ago, whatever it was.
Right.
But man, I've never heard two people sound more New York than
Very.
on that recording. It is, and we were so fueled up because that was a cool festival, and the crowd. There was like a kid on the stage. I mean, it was crazy, and everything is so fast, and like we were young, and especially me, like I would get all hyped up, and I'd be playing completely faster than I should be, and it was just yeah. That was the one thing. Like it became like a slop fest.
Yeah,
But you gotta the essence of it is something that's kind of fun to listen back to because it's
for sure.
crazy.
All right, we got 5 more minutes left on free Zoom. Two more things. Would Repudilation ever get back together with new members or no?
Never.
No. Okay, never.
Can't happen.
Um, how would you feel if like some kid somehow got the files for the 5 songs and just put them right on YouTube how they were? How upset would you be?
Very upset now. I would
Devastated.
have been upset. I would have been upset a while ago anyway. Um, I
So
will say
anyone who
this.
has this that is thinking of doing it out of respect, please
Yeah.
don't. I know 3 others who have it, good buddies of mine. We're kind of like a circle. It's like the 4 of us who have it. Out of respect, we have not leaked
And I
it.
give you guys a lot of credit because
Yeah, and we're
I know
and
there's a
we're
handful
keeping
of
it
people
that
that have it.
way.
There's a
So
handful of people that had it, and the fact that I could go onto YouTube and punch in Encrypted and Blasphemy and nothing comes up is a testament
something will
to.
pop up because I put an April Fool's joke
Oh, is
on
that
the.
you? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
no,
was
I've seen
me.
that, but I didn't know you
It's
back then.
just
So
it's like 2 420 songs and then like the
yeah, I saw
re-recorded
that.
purging songs. I put that as like an April Fool's joke. I always do that. My other April Fool's jokes were like Mortician albums and it's like just like random like SpongeBob as like the movie
That's awesome.
samples. It's like
I
it's
appreciate that.
like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like April Fool's. So if you type in encrypted and blasphemy, something will pop up, but it's not
but it's not it. And
any of the encrypted.
I give you guys and everybody that may have received that through, through the underground, the utmost credit for keeping it under wraps for the time for when it can come and be what it could potentially
What it could
be in a
potentially
release.
be. When it
Um,
comes out, then could I post like the original raw
you'll
guitars on?
when I have checked all 4 boxes, and I say, okay, this thing is going to go. You'll be the first person that I,
You'll be the first one to be like, all right, Jimmy, you can upload
I'll
the
say
original.
have at it once it's released. So, and the funny thing is once it's released, I understand it's going to become its own thing, and I'm fine with that. And it's going to go out there, and people are going to love it, people are going to hate it, whatever it may be. But at least I know that I was able to kind of put it out there because I mean, it's going to die with me if I don't do something with it.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, I'd rather take the energy, put it, put the energy into kind of completing it, get a label to put it out that will do the right thing, and I already know
Do
where I'm
it
going with
justice,
it.
being like, hey, Repudilation fans over the past 30 years, this is a tribute to
100%.
this is what the original vision was for 2026 for all the Repudilation fans.
Yep.
Sorry it took this long.
It's
Sorry it
yeah.
took a
My
bunch of
apologies
sorry it took a
for
bunch of kids to do this, to bring it
it
back.
took it took technology to kind of catch up a bit.
Just like Star Wars, it took 30 years to do it.
Yeah, it is
So
what it is. Yeah,
will it have the demon cover, the with like the circle in the middle with like the.
that is a question too. Now, I don't know. The art situation is an interesting one. If I'm going to go back and do this, there's a lot that's out there, but some of it is not necessarily usable. I
Yeah.
have some people that have originals that are trying to, potentially find some stuff. I just put feelers out to some people. I'm like, listen, can you, do you have some of the artwork? All of it has been paid for. So like technically, it was Repudilation owned. So it's not like I have to find somebody and compensate them for it. But I got to see what I can come up with. And once again, I'm not even going to go down that path until I know I actually have something viable musically to put out.
Right.
So I'll do it in that, the music analysis will continue going on. It's not cheap to get in there
Right.
and spend the time doing it. And then once I feel like, okay, I have something here to lay a vocal on, then that's going to be a process. And then once I'm there, then we can start figuring out. But I'm trying to at least see what I have to work with in terms of art and figuring out that approach. But I'm going to try to keep something. If something comes out of this, I'll try to keep it as authentic as I can, or have something replicated by somebody that was involved early
Yeah. Most
on
of the time.
that could replicate some of that art for
Right.
me, just to kind of keep the integrity
Like
of the whole
90s.
thing.
90s New York death metal. No hardcore. 90s New York death metal.
That is it,
That
100%.
is it.
Exactly.
Well,
I'm not
thank
trying to
you for
change
your
it.
time, Brian.
My pleasure, man.
Repudilation, X Entorturement, Skinned, Internal Bleeding Live, apparently, according to Metal
Yeah.
Archives.
Yes. I mean,
So,
sworn enemy. I mean, I did a tour
thank
with them,
you so
it was,
much. It has been a pleasure. Honor is all yours.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Send
Have
me
a
those
nice
song
night.
titles, by the way.
Yeah, I'll send you the song titles. I have
I
more
appreciate
stuff
it,
than
man.
you.
You do. You really have far more than me.
All right. Peace out. Thanks again.
Take care, man.